Hey everyone, Brad Bradford here. We are taking our podcast For the Love of TO across the city, and what better place to start than in the heart of the beaches at one of my favorite small businesses, Beaches Brewing Co. You know, Carl founded this place a couple of years ago, and it is an absolute destination for the community. Tons of rotating taps and really creative drinks, and some of the classic lagers that we've all come to learn and love and enjoy. And so today we're talking to Tony Chapman. We're gonna sit down, have a beer together, and talk about all the fantastic things about our community and about the city. Let's go check it out.
Toronto is a city of 630 square kilometers with 158 neighborhoods and more than 3 million people, each with their own story to tell. This is For the Love of TO with Brad Bradford.
I am thrilled to be joined by my friend Tony Chapman, one of Canada's most dynamic voices in branding, media, and storytelling. He is a member of the Canadian Advertising Hall of Fame. You've probably seen Tony on TV, you've heard him on the radio, maybe you've been inspired by one of his keynotes or tuned into his podcast, Chatter That Matters. Thank you so much for joining me on For the Love of TO. Great to have you, Tony.
Great to be here.
And where are we? We're here at Beaches Brewing Company, right on Queen Street East in the heart of the beaches here in Toronto. My home, your home. How long you been in the neighborhood?
I've been here almost 15 years now. And when I first heard about the beach, I'd gotten divorced and my real estate agent said, "What about the beach?" I said, "Well, I don't have a dog. I don't have a baby. Why would I want to live in the beach?" And I came down here and literally in a minute, I fell in love with it. I mean, this is a little village inside an extraordinary city. And I'll never leave it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I go down and go for a walk on the boardwalk sometimes, and as you're walking west and you see the downtown skyline, and it's like right there, and yet in the beach, you feel so remote and removed from that. So it does satisfy that sort of small town Main Street feel, but right adjacent to, you know, the third largest city on the continent.
You know, and I have a little semi-detached, but I look at the water and what I see time and time again in the parks are these extraordinary families. And you talk about diversity and how it works. You know, you see some of these people come down and next thing you know, there's 25 or 30 family members. There's a barbecue, there's soccer being played, there's music being played. And you just realize that this is a very inclusive city that allows you to celebrate who you are, what matters, but surrounded with kind of the beauty of a city that's often thousands of miles or thousands of kilometers away from where you originated. So it's a magical place.
We often play host to tens and 20 thousands of people every weekend because Woodbine Beach is one of the, you know, the province's best blue flag beaches. It's a destination not just for our community, the city as a whole and abroad. And so there's always those sort of growing pains, I think, when you're dealing with, you know, 20,000 people on a Saturday. But that's part of the...
That's the energy, you know, like there's two ways to look at it. Oh my God, we have 20,000 people. We have 20,000 people getting their vitamin D, having fun. Of course, you're going to have some bad apples, but if we approach it and even thought of it, why aren't we branding that the same way us, you know, Australia and Sydney would say Bond Beach? You know, why aren't we thinking about Venice Beach? Like, why aren't we turning this into something very different? And a quick branding idea for you. I want to see these lighthouses become works of art. Not lighthouses. I want to see the lifeguard stations become works of art, beautiful pieces, and the miniature version up here connected to our street signs so people know that that street sign will bring you down to one of the great beaches, whether that's Balmy or Woodbine or Ludi. And I think that's what we got to do. We got to connect the city and this beach more.
So that's the brilliance of your mind and branding. I know other cities like Miami have done that. We had the lifeguard stations, cool paint and design and architecture around them. That's
Canadian designers, Canadian architects, and get the real estate guys in the city to say, I'm more than happy to sponsor that. I mean, tell me Rick DeClute wouldn't want to put his name on that because he's so involved in the community. So that's just what I'd love us to do, is really celebrate what we have versus always tear it apart.
So it's a great idea. You heard it here first. Let me ask you, just as a guy who's been in the neighborhood for a long time, is it the beach or is it the beaches? I don't want to, like, you know, turn anyone off here.
But potato. I mean, like, I've always called it the beach. I occasionally slip up to the beaches and I get told by people that live here, I don't understand how it's the beach because there's so many different beaches, but the reality of it is a lot I don't understand, and that's one of them.
Yeah, and I'm kind of, not to show my hand here, but I do acknowledge that there are multiple beaches. It is plural. So
Yeah.
the singularity of the beaches has always been a bit curious, but it does stick.
It does stick. And it is a great place to be. And what a beautiful job the city does with the boardwalk, the gardens, and keeping it clean. And it is truly a wonder of a big city in the world.
Shout out to our park staff down here on the waterfront, because they do a hell of a job, a lot of heavy lifting, and an area that gets a lot of use.
Yeah.
You talk about branding around like the beaches. Every neighborhood in Toronto kind of has its own personality. Beaches, but you've got Cabbagetown, Little Italy, Little Korea. Do you think those brands help strengthen Toronto's story as a whole? Or does that make it more challenging to speak to Toronto issues with one voice?
Well, issues is one thing, but in terms of a brand, they're so important.
Yeah.
I think one of the ones we lost touch with was the gay village, because a lot of the gays no longer had to live in their own community. They could go now, thankfully, populate the world. But the gay village we were one of the most inclusive for the gay community, and that village should be a place where people come down and just celebrate humanity. And I think that the magic of that would be almost like we saw in San Francisco. Is it whether it's the culture, the music, the vibes, the fashion, and more importantly, as a tourist destination, because we know the LGBTQ community actually travels a lot and spends a lot. So as a shameless marketing tool for Toronto, Little Italies of the world, Chinatowns, the gay village, these things are very important to let people around the world know I can go explore lots of different areas of Toronto and really enjoy the fact that this multiculturalism is alive and well.
So lean into that a little bit.
Absolutely. Lean into it and celebrate it. Don't, you're not hurting the Toronto brand by saying we're a mosaic of a lot of great communities.
Yeah. So that's interesting. My background's in urban planning. One of the sort of blunt instruments that we have is a zoning bylaw. And, just this week we were talking about retail and neighborhoods, and it's a bit contentious, but the more important theme there is, do we need a one-size-fits-all approach to growth and development in the city of Toronto? Or is there something to be said to leaning into the, some of the characteristics and the patterns in the different boroughs, whether that's Etobicoke or North York or Scarborough, or even on a neighborhood basis, how that has grown and evolved, and having a different, more nuanced approach in different places? Or do you think big city should be the same thing sort of across the board? What's your view?
I'm not a fan of one size fits all. I can only imagine if Greenwich Village in New York had been suddenly turned into skyscrapers, how much we would have lost a big part of the soul of New York. Because when I go to New York, yes, I want to see Times Square and all the energy, but I also want to wander through the village. And I think it's very important that our unique personalities. The other side, though, is obviously we're dealing with density. That the only way the city is going to afford its infrastructure is to find a way to have more people. So you're constantly going to have that tension point. But I would say that certain neighborhoods really deserve to have more attention put on their unique nuances, especially if they are magnetic to attracting tourism. Because tourism is one of the places where Canada can really grow its economy. We don't do enough of it. You look at Zeta Cobb, what I had my podcast on Fogo Island. You look at Ben Cowandour, what they did with Cabot Trail. And you're creating these places. Well, there could be places in Toronto that people go, build it and the world will come, or preserve it and the world will come.
So that's a really interesting thing to riff off of. Toronto, I think, had a lot of tourism. We had a lot of conferences. We had a lot of people coming here over the past decade. But kind of post-pandemic, some of that stuff has dried up. You look at some of our facilities, whether that is the convention center down at the X or the convention center on Front Street, they're not in that sort of, world-class space with other jurisdictions that we're competing. And these conferences are booked 7 years out. So if you want to attract the sort of biggest business-oriented or tech-oriented conferences, you need to have the facilities for that. Sometimes it feels like Toronto's kind of falling behind on that front.
Way behind. I mean, I've spoken in Mobile conference in Barcelona, 150,000 people.
Wow.
Tech conference in the States could get up to 500,000 people. 10 football fields. We don't have that facility, so we've got to do one or two things. Build it, which means all the permitting and bureaucracy and risk that comes with it, which is not something Canada is known for. Known for the bureaucracy, not risk. Or we go after the B conferences and do them very well. We're going to own longevity. We're going to compete for the TED conferences against Vancouver. We might not get the 100,000, but we can do very well at the 30 or 40,000. But a big problem you have in this city is your traffic and your congestion. I was in the conference business. I wouldn't recommend Toronto right now, because if people come into this city and want to get anywhere and they're so frustrated with how long it takes to get around town, that scores negative points for the conference organizers. And the conference organizers are paid and bonus based on how successful your conference was. Well, how were the ratings? How did people view it? And I think that Toronto has to realize, if conferences is something very important to us, we have to be very strategic in terms of what they're looking for as a customer base, and can we deliver on that? Is that a priority for us, or is our priority less traffic and more bike lanes? And we got to make that choice, because if that's our choice, then don't realize you're surrendering that conference business and move on. But if you want that business, it's not difficult to say to the world, Toronto's a great place to be, as long as you can get around it.
So do we have a branding challenge as it relates to sort of congestion and traffic? Like, I feel like increasingly Toronto is more known for our traffic and our congestion. When you got the Utah Hockey Club bailing off the bus to walk to Scotiabank Arena, when you've got country superstars or the former president and GM of the Raptors bailing out of the Uber to walk to Scotiabank Place, that resonates, and that often gets picked up international headlines. Are you suggesting that becomes a challenge to overcome as a city when we're looking at booking big events?
Without question, and in all fairness, a lot of social media is built on negativity and impossibility. That's the tension point that the social media barons are after, because you get involved in your echo chamber and you want to complain and you want to be a part of it. So anytime you give somebody any element of negativity, it could flourish and turn into a wildfire. The trouble with Toronto is it's constant. Everybody that comes back will talk about how beautiful the city was, but how hard it was to get around, how challenging, how difficult it is. And I think that's something if we are going to rely on tourism, we're going to rely on attracting foreign investment, foreign capital, businesses to build here. I think traffic is a key component, affordable housing and traffic, because they got to have an environment where people can exist within and customers can come to, if they're going to choose Toronto. And if not, with the cloud, and we don't need to be in a big city anymore. I needed to be in Toronto because you had a lake for shipping. You had railway tracks for moving trucks, for moving cargo. Today, with a lot of the stuff in the cloud, I don't need the big city the way I used to. I don't need the density of population the way I needed to. So as Torontonians, you got to put a better foot forward.
So you're a storytelling and branding expert. How would you assess Toronto's brand today? Some of the good things, the strength, the position of strength, but also, some of the challenges or room for improvement. How's our brand?
I think it's interesting, and I'll equate it to the 30 years I've been in the city. When I came up, it was called Hogtown. It was a simple place, but it wasn't an energetic place. And then it really came in its own. It was one of the most admired, beautiful cities. People would come back, your city's so clean. I wish my American cities could be like that. It's wonderful. But I'd say in the last 10 years, it has absolutely fallen. It's in a horrific spiral, because it's no longer about cleanliness, safety. It's no longer about diversity in a positive way. It's about protests, and it's about homeless, and it's about unaffordability and not getting around town. All these negative notes that are now part of the Toronto brand, and that's what's got to change. And listen, I know you're not here to hammer your own campaign, but a reason you're attracting so many people is you're focusing on what is possible as opposed to what is impossible. And I think if we have that attitude as a city, saying, what are the 4 or 5 things we need to do right? I think we could very quickly get our brand back up, especially when it's competing with the US cities.
Yeah.
Because the Americans' brand now is completely being, some would say tarnished, some would say enhanced by Donald Trump, but it's had a massive impact on how you view America. And I would say, if you look at the numbers of people going in and out of it, a lot less people want to go there. So it's had a negative impact. Why aren't we benefiting from it? Why aren't we having record tourism? Why aren't we standing up and saying, hey, you still want that North American vibe, you can get it here. That's what we got to fix if we want to be in the tourism game. And if we're not in the tourism game, I question why, because it's an industry that attracts jobs and energy. It's somewhat AI immune. So that's a place to be.
I think about my experience, growing up, and I grew up in Hamilton, raised by a single mom, 3 kids. We did not have a lot of money, but on my 13th birthday, You know, my mom splurged, got us tickets to the Jays game in the 500 section, took the GO train in. We were down on Front Street and we went to the old spaghetti factory. And I just remember being in awe of the city at that point.
Yeah.
Like it was, you know, it was the shining city on the hill, the
Yeah.
skyscrapers, you know, the shine and the reflection, the streets were clean. You know, it felt like a very safe place. It felt very cosmopolitan and diverse. And you go down to Front Street or the Esplanade today, and it's a very different experience. So I think you're right. We've experienced sort of 10 years of drift in the city where we haven't had the laser focus on those priorities, you know, public safety, cost of living, congestion and mobility. And as a result, you know, you sort of see the circumstances out there where it's never felt less safe, it's never been less affordable, and it's never been more difficult to get around. And I think if we get back to basics, if we focus on those things that local government is well positioned to do, we can reposition the city in a way where it can be a great city to raise a family or build a business and unlock our collective potential as Torontonians.
And I think, I honestly think you're the person for it because you want to go to the middle ground. You're not on the extreme right or left, which is where politics is playing. The issue we have, and we were talking off camera about, you know, people getting jammed into a subway. You know, in Japan, you see these people with brooms. You can only take so much, and then people are left behind. And I would question the numbers we've allowed into this country right now. These are people that have given up everything to come to Canada to chase the Canadian dream. They're some of the most resilient, tenacious, courageous people. And they walk in there and they don't have the opportunity. And what happens is that we've got more people trying to get in the capacity for. And that has to be solved, because you could be the most miracle worker, but if we continue to put, if the unemployment continues to be a crisis, youth unemployment continues to be a crisis, all the wonderful things we want to do are not going to work because the math doesn't work. And I think one of the things you got to do is align yourself provincially and federally and say, especially with AI and automation and robots, what kind of talent do we need going forward as an economy, and what role can Toronto play within that economy? Versus what I think very often happens now is it's just a lot of isolated, even within your city, it seems like there's so lack of coordination, but then the lack of coordination all the way through government, to me, creates a situation where we're letting a lot of people down that we've invited in, and we're letting a lot of people in Canada who are here expecting to have resources, they're sacrificing for those resources as well.
Sometimes it feels like the Canadian dream or the promise of Toronto is failing to materialize. Yeah. And I think that's right. When you look at some of the polling, some of the data points, research, you have a significant majority, 2/3 of Torontonians that feel like our best days as a city are behind us. Yeah. You've got 40% of Torontonians that are contemplating leaving the city in the next 5 years. And you know what? It's a lot of the people that have either come here from abroad, they've brought their time and their capital, their investment, they want to raise a family or build a business here, but they don't feel like they can do it in Toronto anymore. Yeah. So it's a flight for affordability, it's a flight for safety into the GTA, interprovincial, and then sometimes, you know, even beyond that, north-south across the border. And so I think the future of Toronto and having a prosperity agenda is so integral to our success, because we need people to come and work on growth and build things and build it here in Toronto. But if that doesn't feel possible because of the bureaucracy, the red tape, or just the overbearing costs, people are going to go and do that elsewhere.
And you know, it's also, and the last thing I'd say, it's also a flight to opportunity. In the past, Toronto won because that's where their jobs were. You know, that was the default place. But I think what you're talking about is so important, because we have to say to people, it's still possible to do extraordinary things in this city. This is a beautiful place to be, but I would not be spending billions of dollars begging a multinational to set up a branch plant for ribbon cutting. I would say, how do we invest that capital in those entrepreneurs? I ask anybody that's, you know, there's a lot of negativity around newcomers. And first of all, Canada was built on immigration. Right. And the second thing is that most of the people, if you were someone that was to leave Canada and go to a strange country, they didn't even speak your language, how courageous are you? How much are you after a better life for you or your family? Those are the warriors. So how can we set those warriors up with capital? How do we set the entrepreneurs up? Instead of, again, you know, an EV battery plant that Volkswagen owns and can leave on a dime, How do we bring
We're seeing.
which we're seeing? How do we set up more Shopify's of the world? Because again, we don't need access to new. I don't care about the border at Niagara Falls as much as I care what can we create in the cloud. Look at our creative community, Hollywood. Who overpopulates the top songwriters, the top actors, top singers? Canadians. We're extraordinary storytellers, and among the best of the best. We have a Hollywood North up here, considered one of the best movie-making machines and TV-making machines in the world. Why aren't we creating our own Downton Abbeys and selling those to the world? Why aren't we, instead of giving all this money to a CBC in the hope that they somehow, respect the ideology of those in power, say to those guys, you got 24 months to start showing how you can create the content that BBC creates and populate the world with it, and people go, I love that show, that's from Canada. Oh God, did you see that detective show from Canada? As opposed to, this sort of rolling out the beaver tail kind of content. But take advantage of what we have here and do more with it. And Toronto should be the place for that kind of content creation.
Why do politicians at all levels focus so much on attracting that big multinational or landing that plant here rather than what you're suggesting, which is really investing and unleashing Canadian ingenuity, Canadian talent, Canadian competitiveness, and building it here? I had Andrew Graham on the podcast from Barrowell, and it's Canadian-based business, built it right here in Toronto, and now is a global success. You referenced Shopify. Like, how do we sort of change the focus and the mentality to say, let's go on the front end to the founders, to the entrepreneurs, the builders that want to build it here versus casting our gaze abroad and trying to bring people in? I think you have to do both.
You got to do both. You got to be very strategic of who you want here and who you're willing to capitalize. But I think the answer is take investment decisions away from politicians, because politicians can be swayed by lobbyists. Politicians can be swayed by where they're based, by votes, by winning.
Electoral cycles,
and they're not necessarily the right investments. You got John Ruffalo, who lives in our neighborhood, one of the smartest M&A guys. He's asking for a sovereign capital fund. It's okay, put your money where your mouth is, John. We're going to put $1 billion in this fund, and let's go out and attract the top talent out there, take advantage of our universities and our healthcare system, and build a future. Longevity. Why isn't Toronto known as the city that's about adding years to your life and life to your years? And we're going to create a longevity. The same way, they did biology in Singapore. They've done in San Francisco, obviously with Stanford. Why aren't we creating these big bets? And next thing you know, it attracts other like-minded people, and people come to Toronto for major longevity conferences. Now we got a conference that you're after, and they're coming and they're looking and seeing how the green in the city, the quality of the oxygen in the air, the fact that we have blue flag beaches in a major city, and it all starts. The narrative all starts working. People start saying, I'm really proud of this place. You know what? I'm not going to throw garbage on the ground.
Right.
And maybe we're going to start taking care of these homeless people. Maybe longevity is also about, how do I survive on the streets? How do I deal? So all of this stuff can happen, but politicians love a ribbon cutting. It's no different than I spent a lot of time in Costa Rica, and the president would love to cut a ribbon that there's Four Seasons opening a new hotel. Yet some of the local ticos, which they call themselves, have produced some of the most extraordinary places to be that would rival tourism around the world, because it's local and it has that local notes. But where would you want to have the prime minister? I want to be out there because the Four Seasons is going to get me the attention I deserve, versus put the attention on who really deserves it.
I want to jump over to just building a business, because that's kind of what we're talking about. You've done that. You've had your reps as an entrepreneur. You've been able to have several exits and done very well. What were the challenges like when you were standing up your marketing businesses, and how is that different than what it's like now? Or is it the same?
Canada lacks an appetite for risk. The best way I can describe it is America survived because it fought for its freedoms, and it created a republic and a charter constitution. We just negotiated a deal with the British, and ever since then, it seems like we're always expecting government to take care of us. We're always expecting government's gonna, we lose the job, here, Carney's gonna show up, and here's $2 billion more for the workers. And if we were really looking at each other, we'd say, you're boring on the backs of tomorrow to keep yourself in power today.
Right.
So I think that the difference is, for entrepreneurs, my entire career, is this appetite to say we can do it. We can go after the top. We don't have to even go for bronze. We can go after the gold medals. We can show we're capable of being one of the best. We created AI. Where is it now? There's a company in the States that took our technology and insights, I mean, not our technology, but certainly built it, and they have a GDP, they have a market value bigger than our GDP. I mean, so why aren't we building these things here versus there? And to me, why didn't Musk stay in Canada and build Tesla here versus go down to the States? Because I think we lack that sense of we're all in. Right? I love what you're doing. I'm behind you 100%. Instead of somebody whispering, oh, okay, maybe I got to back off. Right? And that's your, I love when you're talking and listen, I've been to a couple of private door things, you were all with friends. There was no campaigning. There was no vote for me. And what I loved about you is you speak from your heart. You tell it like it is. You're honest with people. And I think that is the kind of, I hope the pendulum is going to switch in politics. I'm not happy with in Ottawa, either party. I'm not happy with the Conservatives always chirping, and I'm not happy with the rhetoric coming from the Liberals and no action. I think that the difference is here, you're making change. I can point to two things in my neighborhood. He's my counselor. Interesting enough. A couple of years ago, there was a business that was set up. They didn't have the rights to set up, and it was hurting the local entrepreneurs that paid for permits. And they were doing, setting up paddleboarding. And you found a way to stop it. You used the law, and you put the right pressure on it so that the entrepreneurs that had paid for the license could compete. The summer, we were starting to see these like mosquitoes, these wave runners, and there was chaos, and they were coming right near where people were swimming and enjoying the beach. You put a stop to that. To me, politics is about impacting change. Sometimes little things, sometimes big things. But again, with Toronto, pick 2 or 3 lanes. Let's go after them, and let's get because the talent you're talking about leaving, and I'm going on a bit of a rant. What we don't realize is the people that are thinking about leaving have the means to leave. They're the people with the wealth. They're the people with the assets. They're the people with the entrepreneurial spirit. They're the last people you want to say goodbye to.
You have been hosting a podcast. You've done 300 episodes now. It's called Chatter That Matters. Lots of people are familiar with it. What I love about that is it's inspiring stories of Canadians. And we were talking about some of the divisiveness that comes up online and in different communities. You're focusing on the positives, the greatest things about our country. What was the inspiration for standing up that platform, quite a while ago now, and really being on the front end of that and bringing those stories to Canadians?
I mean, I got to credit RBC with this because when COVID hit, I reached out to them and I said, small business is going to get decimated. I've got a lot of time. I can put together a podcast. I can get people like Arlene Dickinson and Joe Mimran to talk about Sammy's Flower Shop. Sammy's Flower Shop would never hear from Arlene Dickinson. We can make it happen. And then went along with it. The idea manifested because they said, we love small business, but is it not? I said, you're right, it's human journeys. And every week I share a story of somebody overcoming circumstances, we all do. And when they do, they get to chase or reclaim their dream. That's exciting. And they change their world and often ours for the better because they're about positivity and possibility. What we're countering is social media barons and want to spend a lot of time hurting you in an echo chamber where you're with like-minded people who like like-minded content, and your reason for being and staying is you got to hate the other guy. So we create this divided country. I think that what I'm hoping with Chatter That Matters and other things is that we move people back to the middle, and you go, I might not exactly agree with what you say. You might not exactly agree, but is there a consensus? And from the consensus, can we both walk away saying that's worth building on versus what you say I want to tear apart and what I say you want to tear apart? And that sadly is the state of our nation. I put it right at the foot of the Liberals. I used to vote Liberals. I put it right at the foot of the Liberals staying in power by dividing to conquer, as opposed to, I would say, that previous Liberals like Martin, Chrétien, or Conservatives like Harper and Mulroney were saying, yeah, I'm Conservative, you're Liberal, but we're both pretty well in the center. I'm a little left, you're a little right. I'm a little right, you're a little left. And I think that's what's refreshing. And I hope you're the beginning of a new style of politics coming along where people are capable of getting people to buy in so that we can get at things.
You were a pretty prolific LinkedIn poster. You're a great follow for anyone online that's interested. Do you still believe that social media can be a place for positive discourse where you can share an opinion and perhaps move someone or take in input that you hadn't considered? Can it be positive, or are we not there as a country right now?
I think social media barons have done a great job taking away that, because that's boring. And they want to, where do people want to sit in an F1 race at the hairpin turn where things might happen, as opposed to the straightaway. And they know that, and that's what keeps you there. And they monetize eyeballs. Even LinkedIn, when I started really getting involved politically, just getting people to understand the liberal point of view, the conservative point of view, and no matter what point of view, there was always an absolute social media slingshots coming out, and the most horrific expressions, like, whether you like Carney or not, he's devoting his life to public service. The same with Pullave. Jagmeet Singh, whether you like them or not, they've made a commitment to public service, challenge their policies, challenge maybe what you think is their naive point of view, but to attack. And I know you've been attacked. And it's, to me, I think that's the problem with social media is there's very few people that say, is it really worth running anymore? I'd love to see John Love run for Prime Minister of Canada. I
Got some great ideas.
I mean, but you put Love there, you put somebody in Ontario, you put you in Toronto, and the three of you would be talking and saying, okay, this is what I will do, you do, New Year, let's get at it. It's just not happening right now. We're spending trillions of dollars. We got $1.5 trillion of debt, and I look around and go, what do we show for it? The city, I go, what do we show for all this money, these property taxes, horrific double inflation property taxes? I'm going, I don't think the city's gotten better in the last couple of years. I think it's gone worse. So where's this money gone?
So if there is this dominant sort of negative theme, the attacks, the people that want to tear others down, how do you get great people to step up for public office? Because I even reflect on the last federal election, and there were some great candidates in the two major parties there, but when you looked at the Conservatives last fall that looked like they were moving into government, I wouldn't necessarily say that there were the people coming off the sidelines into the fold to the extent I would have thought for a party that seemed like they were about to form government. Now, Carney did attract some people there, but certainly when it was Trudeau, nobody was coming off the sidelines. So in this, even in this world where it seems like, one party is going to form government or the other, you still don't have super talented folks from, the business community or the not-for-profit sector, people who have driven impact on the sidelines that feel comfortable stepping in the arena.
Yeah, and I think Carney has attracted a couple of really interesting people, but I think you could say, I'm not going to do this job. I'm going to get a John Ruffalo. I'm going to get a John Love. I'm going to get Jeannie Becker on our fashion industry. I'm going to get people that really understand the industry, and I'm going to empower them. So as a government, I'm not going to try to be the chess player. I'm just going to find a way to bring the best of government to work with the best of the private sector. I think is the future. It has to be, because what I see now is government is really horrible at spending our money. Horrible at it. And the reason they're horrible about it is we talked about it. It's the cycle. I want to stay in power. It's lobbying. It's my region. As opposed to saying, like, what are the biggest bets for Toronto next year, and sell it to the city going, this is why we're focusing on these areas.
Yeah.
As opposed to, every which way you turn, which kind of throwing mud against the wall, hoping that little splinter group will go, oh, I like that, I'll vote for that. So to me, I think the pendulum's going to swing back, and I think we're going to see, optimistically, we're going to see some young leaders like you and others emerge and start working together. And when they do, I think we're going to see some fantastic things happen.
Let's wrap on a positive here. Give me 10 years out, the future of Toronto, what that looks like if everything lines up and we're firing on all cylinders. What should the goal or the vision of Toronto be like for the next 10, 15 years?
I see an economy very much focused on innovation, entertainment and experiences, and content creation. I think we could be extraordinary, all combined with the small business that feeds that. I see a city that's incredibly clean, moves well, that we're taking advantage of new technologies. We're not doing city planning for today, but we realize there will be driverless cars. We won't own our own cars in 5 or 6 years. It'll all be, we will just hire a car when we need it, and the roads will work a lot better. I see a city where it really values as being the place to be. We understand that people want to be safe, secure, they want love, they want belonging, they want affordability. They really, when they look at Toronto, they say, these are one of the places in the world. I can still practice my religion, I can still speak the language I love, but at the same time, I'm woven into a much bigger story called Toronto, and the world is looking at us with such envy because people here are happy, they're empowered, they're energized, they're excited, and they have purpose.
Well, that's very inspiring. I am so proud and grateful that you are part of Toronto Stories today. I hope you will be on a go-forward basis. And thank you so much for joining us on For the Love of TO. If you want to follow Tony, you can check him out on LinkedIn or on X at Tony Chapman. And check out the Chatter That Matters podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you pick that stuff up. Thanks again, Tony. We'll see you next time.
I'm looking forward to casting my vote for you, my friend.
Thanks.
Okay.
This is For the Love of TO.